So you can switch between different engines in your MXXX or M-Sound factory using the ratio controller, which is this guy right here. And on this instance, I have it just to two different places for simplicity's sake. So we can use the keys C or D, which is actually C2 and D2, to switch between this and this. So that's really, really, really cool because these are two completely different systems. And normally you just key switch within one particular engine like M-Power Synth or Contact or M-Sound Factory, whereas this allows the capability to go really wild with the depths of ratio splitting. And this is the basic one that allows the switching between two, and you can also change how the switch occurs. So that's a really tight one. And then they also have a fade, and they have a linear, more smooth cut, and then they have constant power, which has a little bit of an overlap. So you can kind of see how the crossfade between the channels is reflected here. There's just a very powerful fade out into a very powerful fade in. So anyway, this is a really cool idea that they have developed here to switch between these very different systems. So that in this way you could have like a very powerful instrument that has, instead of just like two components, it's really however much power your system can handle, really. So how I did that is, there's a couple ways you can do it, of course. But I just open up an M ratio, and there's several different versions for the type of ratio splitting you want to do. You can do a similar thing with the mixer, but for simplicity's sake and being able to see the crossfade right off the bat, M ratio is a cool way to go. So anyways, you would go in and you would select your M ratio, and then you would choose to take whatever inputs you need to take to work the key switch. In this case, I used multi. So it would have the ability to take multiple inputs up to 6 and then crossfade between all of those inputs on the different layers of the ratio split. So in other words, if I was over here, it would go between one element. And if I was over here, it would go between another two elements. And if I was over here, you know what I mean? So that's one way you can set this all up. But additionally, you could have it so that they have like a little bit of a crossfade overdub, so that you could have the split happen here. And how that is all dependent is how you set up the MIDI controller, which is this. So that's the more complicated part of this, which is the final round here. To do this, you would go into like the MIDI learn, or you would go to open MIDI settings. And I would choose open MIDI settings because the learn can be tricky because you're using the notes feature. So once you're in the notes feature, you can click learn and then kind of set that through the learn. But that can get kind of confusing. I would suggest just entering manually where the bottom note is and where the top note is to make the split. And in this case, I only have two elements, so I just need two keys. So it allows me to be able to make a split very quickly between these two elements. And I can change like how much of the value of the split occurs. So if I didn't want to make a full 100% split, I could just have it down to here, and there would be a little bit of a overlap in tone. So that's an example of how you can have multiple versions of splits going on in your M ratio. So we have renamed this here so that it's KeySwitch, just to make it simple. But the actual name of the component is, of course, M ratio. So that's one way you can toggle with key switches, and you can set up many different kinds of systems. So for instance, if you have M-Sound Factory and you want to split between this analog factory and maybe something acoustic, and whatever else you can dream up, then you could use that to do that kind of split very quickly. So if you have these very large sample banks, you don't have to worry about the engine having to reload things very quickly or some kind of cache system. Instead, all these things are preloaded, which does have its memory impact. But the point here is to build a really cool, powerful, ready to go, ready to fire up system. And they also have the bank system, which goes kind of into the other direction to reserve and conserve overhead. But in this way, you have a very interesting way to key switch, between these systems. And of course, you can also use things like mod wheels and whatever, using M ratio to control these things. But I like the idea of the key switch because it's right there on the key, with the keyboard. And if you have a controller, that has like a lot of knobs or whatever that you don't need or don't use, you can of course use that instead. Or you can of course probably set up your tablets or whatever to perform a similar function using some kind of input system. But in this instance, we keep it all on the keyboard so that we can quickly switch between very sophisticated instruments, and we can finesse however we want the split to occur as well. Very nice feature.